Oh, those guys. In German.
So, being up there just myself and my dog, you know, the whole point of going up there was because a local timber caller, an old retired fellow, had told me that he knew where the Sasquatches lived, that they lived in the valley behind the mountain, behind the cabin. Because back in the 70s, they had been logging up there, and big oil drums and equipment and stuff had been tossed off down into the canyon where the creek comes from that flows past my cabin. So that was my whole thing, to go up there that day. I had a couple of good sticks in my backpack, and I was going to go up and make some knocks and see if I could get some kind of response. So here I'm sitting there listening to this strange talking, not even thinking Sasquatch. But, you know, if they're hunters that are down there, I don't want them shooting. So I figured, well, and I don't really want them to know that I'm a female out here by myself either. So what do? I get my sticks out and I make a knock, and it stops immediately. You know, that was it. So I'm sitting there and I'm listening some more, nothing else happens. So I'm thinking, okay, time's flying, it's getting late, let's get to the top of the hill. So I stand up, and immediately right behind me I hear this deep guttural, this grunt. Well, right behind me, you know, the brush was so thick you couldn't see a foot into it. So I'm thinking there must be a bear just on the other side of these bushes, and it's time to move on up the hill. So we get up to the top. I get my sticks out, you know, I'm looking at this canyon where the creek flows way down there, and I do some knocks, no response. I was so disappointed, no Bigfoot activity up there. So it's getting late in the day, we start back down, and there's this one stretch of trail where it gets down onto a logging road, and the logging road goes down and there's a switchback. But instead of taking the switchback, the trail, I just went ahead and took the trail that's between the upper and lower stretches of road. And at that point, it had been selectively logged through there. So it was really open. You could see clearly for a good distance. And we're halfway down this little narrow stretch of trail between the upper and lower roads, and I hear this very human-like whistle right beside me on the trail, and it's like, there's nobody there. And immediately at the bottom of the trail by the logging road, there's another whistle. There's nobody there. And, you know, me and the dog are looking at each other, and we're looking around, and okay, I don't know what that was. Must have been the elk, you know. I've been around the elk for many, many years and never heard anything quite like that, but, you know, it must have been the elk.
Right.
That's what you chalk them up to, something that you know, something you're aware of. So we keep walking, we get down to the lower stretch of the road, and from that point, the trail is really steep and rutted out. So from that point, we decided to go ahead and go down the logging road. So my dog's walking ahead of me. We get to this kind of a bend in the road, and we go around the bend. She stops and she looks back at me, so I know there's something up around the bend. I take a few more steps, and sure enough, there's a couple of elk standing in the road. Okay, that's what it was elk. So we go on down around the next switchback, and I look up, and there's the whole herd of elk up on the bank. Oh, wow, cool, there's the whole herd. We just keep walking. And the next thing I know, I hear this, I can feel it, the thundering of hooves as they all come down across the road behind me and run through the woods off to the side. And so, oh, there goes the elk. And then it's like, what is that? Gorilla? We don't have any gorilla. Oh my God, it's Bigfoot. And he's just kind of off at this angle from me. And when I first looked and saw him, he's facing me. And as soon as I saw him, he turned and it was just profile, and he went right off in the same direction as the elk. Although the elk were running at top speed, he appeared to be just floating along, just walking. And I watched him. I could only see him from about chest up. I could see his head and his shoulders. I could see his huge crown where his head went back and this big cone, massive jaw. He had this big brow ridge where above it, instead of having a forehead like this, it went straight back. It was like scooped out over his eyes, but he had these two bony ridges that went up the side like this, and his skin was pasty pale white, and his eyes seemed to be black. His hair was black and had a little bit of wave to it, and I can remember thinking, you know, with brushing, that would be a beautiful coat. But my thought was, should I be afraid? And I thought to myself, well, you know, you spent the last 30 years in the woods most of the time by yourself. You've never been afraid before. Why should you be afraid now? If they wanted to get you, they would have got you a long time ago. You know, if you're going to be afraid, that's a conscious decision to be afraid. And if I make that decision, my life will never be the same again. I'll never be able to go outside again. And I didn't feel like I was threatened, so why should I be afraid? His focus appeared to be on the elk. He wasn't looking at me, he was looking at them. So we just stood there and watched him go by, and he got just to the edge of this tree line where he was above the final leaves of the maple, the vine maple that hadn't come completely down yet. And I'm thinking, okay, one more step and I'm gonna see the full figure. And he took that one more step and he wasn't there anymore. It was like he walked behind an invisible wall. He just vanished into thin air. And at that point in time, I had never heard of cloaking before. It wasn't an option. That wasn't something that I was even beginning to be capable of understanding. So I stood there for probably 10 minutes and I stared at that spot trying to figure out where it went. And I finally took my eyes off that spot and I looked down at Gabby, my dog. She's standing beside me. She stared right at that same spot too. She hadn't moved a muscle, didn't move, not an inch. And we looked at each other and it's like, it's getting dark, we better go. So I spent the next 2 days just trying to wrap my head around what I'd seen. For the next 2 weeks after that, I made several trips back up to that spot and I looked at that, where I was and where he was, the lay of the land, trying to rationalize what I had seen. And finally it came down to, well, he must have dropped to the ground faster than my eyes could perceive and then crawled away behind a rise of ground. Well, that was a rational explanation, and now I could finally tell people that I saw Bigfoot, because, I mean, it's hard enough to say, hey, I saw Bigfoot. And then, but yeah, he just vanished into thin air. That was just too far. How do you do that?
Yeah, right.
So once I had that part of it rationalized, I contacted the BFRO and I made a report. I started asking my neighbors, people that come into the store, locals, if they'd ever seen anything. I was shocked at how many people had had experiences. You know, it's a small town, and when you're in a small town, people talk, and you pretty much know everything there is to know about everybody. But there are certain things that people don't talk about unless you ask them. And there were a lot of stories that came out. And there were a lot of people that wouldn't say a word if there was anybody else around. You know,
Right.
And then there were the people that it opened up conversation, and they didn't even realize they'd had an experience until they started talking about it. And it'd be along the lines of, you mean they throw things? We thought that was kids messing with us. You know, or the Ohio Howl type screams, you know, we've heard those up there before, and people would chalk that up to, well, it must have been a sick elk. You know, if you don't already have Sasquatch in your mind as something that's a real option, your brain is never going to go there when you're trying to rationalize what you're experiencing. It's going to be the last thing that you think of because it's not an option. Like cloaking, it wasn't an option.
No.